When I was appointed caretaker of the grand yet aging Landon mansion, I felt eager to uncover the secrets that lurked within its ornate stone walls, down its sumptuously decorated hallways, and behind the many closed doors that barred entry to unused wings and rooms. The towering spires, intricate gargoyles, and massive windows hinted at untold stories from the many souls who had passed through over the decades. I could only imagine what mysteries awaited me there, and what I might learn about the mansion's previous inhabitants. This caretaker position was an opportunity to peel back its hidden history, one page, room, and relic at a time. During my routine inspection of the grounds one overcast morning, I stumbled upon a sealed wing, hidden behind thick creeping ivy that wildly obscured the brick facade. Judging by the advanced, deteriorated state of the entrance, with its weathered wooden door and rusting iron fixtures, this wing had remained undisturbed and forgotten by time for many years. My curiosity was immediately piqued, wondering what could be languishing there in the darkness and thick layers of dust. Armed with my skeleton keyring, I decided to unseal the wing and venture inside to satisfy my intense longing to uncover more of the mansion's secrets. The stale air inside the long-abandoned wing was heavy with the weight of the mansion's long past. My footsteps echoed down the arched hallway as I passed room after room, filled with remnants of bygone eras. Stern family patriarchs gazing intensely from ornate gilded portraits coated in grime, antique furniture draped in yellowed sheets that diffused the sunlight streaming in through dirty windows. It was as if this wing had remained hermetically sealed for a century, untouched by modern hands until my arrival. I couldn't help but feel both excitement and unease, knowing I was resurfacing history, yet unsure what I would exhume. Moving slowly through the musty rooms full of cobwebs and dust motes swirling in the faint light, I made my way to the grand, if decaying, drawing room. I was startled to encounter several ghostly figures dressed in extremely outdated clothing who appeared to be reenacting scenes from their lives. They took no notice of me whatsoever, so caught up were they in their bizarre phantom pantomimes. I soon deduced from their attire and conversational snippets that these spirits were the long-deceased Landon family, former inhabitants of the mansion from a bygone era. As I observed the spectral tableau unfold before me, the family dynamics emerged into focus. The stern, imposing patriarch with an emotionless face was Lord Landon himself, clearly a domineering presence during his life. His delicate, frightened wife was Lady Landon, recoiling from his presence with a gloominess about her. Their children, a boy and a girl, both appeared trapped and burdened by their parents' profoundly dysfunctional relationship that played out in dour silence. Lord Landon's dark secret quickly became evident as a maid appeared. He was engaging in a clandestine, illicit affair behind his wife's back. Lady Landon was but a powerless prisoner in her own lavish yet loveless home, with no agency to defend or assert herself. Her pleas for basic decency and respect clearly fell upon her cruel husband's deaf ears during his lifetime. One fateful night, according to the Phantom's reenactment, the tension that must have been simmering below the surface reached a breaking point. Lord Landon, in a drunken rage fueled by dark vices, violently lashed out and struck Lady Landon, causing her to lose balance and fatally hit her head on the sharp marble edge of a table. The Landon children, mere helpless adolescents, witnessed the entire horrific act unfold before their young, impressionable eyes. As the apparitions played out, their anguished, tortured cries echoed through the entirety of the mansion's cavernous, silent halls. Overwhelmed by shock and grief, they were locked sobbing in their rooms by their father, while their mother lay dead, abandoned and alone on the cold, hard marble floor of the drawing room mere rooms away. Sometime later, Lady Landon's forlorn specter appeared directly before me, her eyes overflowing with eternal sorrow and pain. In the faintest whisper, she spoke two simple yet desperate words: "Help us. Free us." In that charged moment, I knew intrinsically that I must vigorously commit myself to helping these tormented souls find some semblance of peace and closure. As I researched the case alone over the coming weeks, I discovered highly suspicious discrepancies regarding the circumstances of Lady Landon's sudden, premature death. Despite the evident violence and rage that precipitated her killing, it had been hastily ruled a trivial domestic accident by corrupt authorities at the time, allowing the influential Lord Landon to completely escape any investigation or consequences for his crime. Meanwhile, the Landon children, left irreparably traumatized by witnessing their mother's murder, were promptly sent away, their ultimate fates frustratingly unknown. I became obsessed with thoroughly investigating what truly happened that night and exposing the truth of Lord Landon's misdeeds. Justice needed to be served, even decades belatedly. For Lady Landon's restless spirit to be finally free and at peace, her story needed to be passionately uncovered and retold by one person who cared: me. Over the following lonely weeks and months as I continued my solitary investigation, the ghosts persisted in repetitively reenacting their trauma and pain, almost like a skipping record. I hoped somewhere in their manifestations might lie further clues into the darkness and simmering dysfunction that once poisoned this household. Lady Landon would sporadically visit me as well, always repeating her same plea, pleading for me to be the one to free her spirit from the shackles of deception and forgetfulness. Through exhaustive late nights poring over generations of family records, personal effects, and documents, along with corroborating the ghost's own eyewitness accounts, I slowly pieced together the full sinister truth of events that had been deliberately buried after Lady Landon's death. Separating truth from falsehood, I finally dug up the accurate sequence of events depicting what really happened on that violent night that ended Lady Landon's life prematurely. The authorities of the time may have constructed lies to absolve Lord Landon, but the dead do not lie, and Lady Landon deserved justice. It became clear that no one else had ever known or cared to know the extent of the Landon family's buried traumatic past and legacy of domestic abuse, except me. And so I vowed I would honor Lady Landon's memory in whatever small ways I could, even if minimally. I faithfully tidied and cleaned her portrait, refreshing the flowers displayed below it weekly. I brought bright blooms and candles to her lonely, neglected bedroom, so she would know she was remembered. In time, after I felt I had uncovered all there was to unearth, I decided to unseal the abandoned wing once more, allowing fresh air and sunlight to flow freely through its rooms and hallways for the first time in forever. Though clues were still missing, I had to hope the full truth of the darkness and pain that occurred here was now exhumed, so that Lady Landon and her poor children could find some shred of solace. They deserved to be heard and mourned. I said a small prayer, wishing them peace. My tenure as the caretaker of the eminent yet haunted Landon mansion profoundly changed and shaped me as a person. I emerged with a renewed respect for the dead, believing it is my obligation to perpetually remember and honor them, especially those whose stories and injustices went ignored or buried. For the walls of these old mansions do not forget their secrets easily. The echoes of the past remain, waiting to be uncovered and heard once more. As an amateur historian, I have always been drawn to hidden corners heavy with forgotten lives and untold tales languishing in the past. So when I first heard hushed whispers about an abandoned cemetery deep in a remote forest bordering the outskirts of the struggling former logging town of Townsen, I knew I had to uncover and preserve its secrets before time erased them completely. I arrived in Townsen early on a foggy morning, the empty streets and boarded-up storefronts already cloaked in a melancholy stillness. At the peeling local library, I dug through archives caked in dust, searching for clues about the cemetery's origins. All I could find were brief mentions in outdated land records, showing it was established as a burial ground for the rural families in the surrounding area over a century ago. Microfilm copies of the Weekly Gazette from the late 1800s yielded a few obituaries for some of the first interred there. Ordinary folk who scratched out modest lives harvesting timber or on fledgling farms. Seeking local insight, I next visited Gladys, the town's 93-year-old lifelong resident at her small cottage on the edge of the encroaching forest. She recalled playing among the graves as a girl when the cemetery was still maintained, sharing chilling local legends passed down about restless spirits that roamed the overgrown grounds after dark. Her childhood friends even dared each other to touch the decrepit iron gate at midnight, though she never took part. As far as she knew, no one had ventured near the site in decades. She warned me to take care up there alone, a tinge of fear in her rheumy eyes. Armed with my notebook, tape recorder, and shovel, I followed the winding dirt path from the outskirts of town into the looming pines, their towering silhouettes concealing the ruins and muffling the outside world. I pushed through waist-high weeds and brambles, getting torn by briars as I forced open the creaking cemetery gate, its rusted iron latticework warped but still standing. The cracked granite headstones lurked like crooked teeth, consumed by lichen and mosses. I slowly cleared back the choking vegetation, documenting each grave marker I uncovered, and piecing together a map of the burial plots. Many of the inscriptions had been worn away by time, but I could make out family names from Gladys's stories. Generations of timber workers, homesteaders, and laborers who carved out a hardscrabble existence from the rugged land. Their faded names were the only record of forgotten lives, and I was determined to preserve their memory. As dusk fell on that first day alone among the dead, an uncanny chill descended with the shadows. A spectral figure materialized in the gloaming, the lingering spirit of a young woman in antiquated dress, her face a palimpsest of loss and sorrow. Her hollow voice echoed through the silence as she recounted her tale, a melancholy soliloquy about her beloved lost to the trenches of France, leaving her to face decades alone. In the following days, more spirits emerged with the setting sun, compelled by the renewed interest in their long-neglected graves. Their voices formed a mournful chorus that granted me a glimpse into Townsen's heavier past. Lives cut short by the relentless harshness of frontier living. A mother weeping over the smallpox-ridden bodies of her children. A crazed prospector still grasping for a fortune that never materialized. Victims of logging accidents, influenza, saloon shootouts. Their trauma and grief hung heavy like the fog rolling through the crooked pines. I learned that the town itself was founded on tragedy. A band of pioneers escaping drought and famine in the West, only to face new hardships here. Floods, blizzards, wildfires had all devastated the community over generations. The population dwindling with each fresh catastrophe as residents gave up and moved on. But their legacy persisted in the spirits chained to this place through the lingering cruelty of circumstance. By day, I pored through property archives, census records, newspaper obituaries, collecting genealogical breadcrumbs to reconstruct identities. I interviewed Grey Lake's eldest denizens, recording oral histories and handed-down folklore. And by night I lingered among the headstones, bearing witness as the ghosts replayed their torment, giving voice to the voiceless. No magic or ritual was required to lay the past to rest. Only tireless dedication to truth and remembrance. As the missing pieces came together, the specters appeared less restless, their forms losing definition. By simply listening, documenting, and honoring lives largely forgotten, I had granted a measure of absolution to their lingering pain. On my last night in the cemetery, a shooting star traced an arc above the shadowy pines before winking out. The spirits had gone silent, the grounds now wrapped in an almost serene stillness. My work here was done. I had illuminated history, allowed the dead to tell their stories. Their whispers ride the wind if you listen closely. A reminder that remembrance bears responsibility. We each fade, but our echoes resonate through time if heard. Antiquing has always called to me. I'm drawn to artifacts that have weathered generations, each object imprinted with echoes of forgotten lives. So when I stumbled upon the curious Cellar, a tiny antique store nestled deep in the rolling hills of Haversham County, I felt an immediate tug. Stepping inside was like entering a time capsule. The cramped space overflowed with relics, ornate gilded mirrors, mahogany secretaries, chandeliers dripping in crystal. The shelves groaned under leather-bound books, sheaves of aged maps, and other ephemera. But even more intriguing were the eclectic curios, taxidermy specimens, spindly medical tools, shadow boxes of butterflies. The shop itself seemed alive, each object imbued with memory. As I squeezed down the cluttered aisles, one artifact called out to me, a porcelain doll with chestnut ringlets and penetrating sage eyes. Her Victorian gown was intricately embroidered, her petite hands encased in lace gloves. When I asked the shopkeeper about the doll, he hesitated, averting his eyes. She's special. Been passed down through many hands over the years. I've learned not to pry too deeply into her past. His cryptic response only amplified the doll's mystery and allure. There was an undeniable energy surrounding her, a sense of untold histories and ruptured lives churning beneath the still surface. I knew she must become mine. That first night at home, I sensed a shift in the very atmosphere. The shadows themselves seemed to flutter and contort, void black voids swirling just outside my vision. And in those negative spaces I thought I heard whispers, frayed remnants of voices clawing up from unfathomable depths. Over subsequent nights, the sensations crescendoed. the whispers clarified into scattered phrases in myriad tongues, some modern, some ancient and unplaceable. I began chronicling the phenomenon in a diary, describing the charged ambience that now permeated my home. 1 week later, the doll's power fully manifested. As I sat reading one stormy evening, her eyes suddenly glowed with inner radiance. An apparition appeared before me, a young Victorian girl in lace, her aura pulsing. Desperation carved the lines of her face. "You must help us," she implored, her form rapidly dissolving to smoke. "I have been trapped for so long." Hers was only the first tortured soul to channel itself through the doll. Night by night, more spirits possessed the porcelain vessel, glimpses into their forgotten lives violently interrupted. A blood-spattered soldier with hollow, sunken eyes spoke of humanity's innate cruelty before he too dematerialized. An immigrant seamstress wept about her dreams turning to ash on unfamiliar shores. A mother cradling a limp child described the impotence of medicine in the face of an incurable plague. Their tales converged into a tapestry of buried pain and stolen potential. I became consummate with excavating the truth behind the doll and its inhabitants. Scouring records and placing calls, I managed to uncover some of their names and obscurate his stories. Lives prematurely cut short, memories erased by time. The spirits seemed to draw solace from having their pasts exhumed, speaking with ever more clarity and cohesion. 3 months in, I decided to trace the doll's ownership back through the centuries, hoping to comprehend her origins. A clue from the shopkeeper led me to an estate sale in a distant county years earlier. Slogging through archives, legal documents, and microfiche obituaries, I followed the trail through several families, each beset by catastrophe after acquiring the doll. The doll, it emerged, was originally an unwanted inheritance, gifted by a reclusive aunt dabbling in folk magic and spiritualism. She had crafted the doll to preserve life by trapping the spirits of the dying inside. But this unholy ritual left the souls suspended in perpetual purgatory. Each inheriting family came to ruin, and the doll changed hands repeatedly over generations. I devised a ceremony without darkness, only compassion and respect for the dead, hoping it would help their souls. One by one I called to the spirits, thanked them, acknowledged their ruptured lives and unjust fates. The doll remains still and empty, yet sometimes I still feel traces of the ghosts that were freed. Their memories linger at the edges of perception, remnants of lives that deserved remembrance. My world is now wider, the veil lifted. I move forward without fear of darkness, only awe for the mysteries that surround us always. It was a bitter winter night when I boarded the late train heading home to see my family for the holidays. I settled into my faded velvet seat near the back as the train lurched forward into the darkness. Frozen pines rushed past the foggy windows, and snow swirled in the icy wind as we traveled deeper into the remote wilderness, far from any signs of civilization. A full moon hung like a specter in the starless sky, casting an eerie glow over the silent sleeping cabins. I pulled my coat tighter and tried to sleep, the rocking of the car steadily clicking down the track. I awoke some time later to find the train unnaturally still, the jolting motion that had lulled me to sleep now oddly absent. The only sound was the keening wind outside buffeting the car. Unsettled, I stood and slid open my cabin door, hoping to ask the conductor what was happening. But the narrow paneled hallway was empty and silent, the doors to the other private rooms all tightly shut. The whole carriage felt heavy with an uncanny atmosphere, and the hair on my neck stood on end. Apprehension rising. I made my way forward toward the dining car, looking for signs of life. The dining car appeared frozen in time, abandoned plates of half-eaten dinners left on tables, a shattered wine glass staining the white linen crimson. An untouched dessert cart sat forlornly, its sumptuous cakes and tarts now melted and congealed, attracting a swirling halo of fat flies. It was as if the entire train had vanished into thin air, leaving me alone and increasingly unmoored. I hurried my pace toward the head of the train, past more empty dormitories, anxiety blooming in my chest. Where was everyone? And why had we stopped in the barren wilderness, still far from the next station? I finally arrived at the forward first-class passenger compartments only to find them equally vacant, though there were signs of the occupants' hasty departure. A maid's cart overturned, a door hanging ajar, a lamp flickering erratically in the narrow hallway. It was then that I first glimpsed the apparition, a fleeting shadow curling around a corner at the far end. I froze, breath trapped in my throat, as spectral faces began to materialize, their hollow eyes trained on me. Craggy men in top hats and ladies in lace veils floated by soundlessly, their forms transparent and wavering like smoke. Too shocked to scream, I spun on my heel and sprinted back the way I had come, toward the rear of the train. The phantoms drifted behind me, mute and implacable. I burst through the swinging doors into the familiar safety of my cabin and slammed them shut, collapsing onto the bench as my heart hammered violently. It couldn't be real. Ghosts did not exist. It had to be a strange waking dream brought on by the rhythm of the rails. But the chilling encounters kept coming over the lonely hours that I remained trapped on that stationary train as I drifted to sleep again. I awoke sometime later to find the world outside still cloaked in impenetrable darkness, the full moon suspended as if frozen in the same position it had occupied for hours on end. Checking my watch, I realized with dread that no time had passed at all since I had fallen into a fitful, restless sleep. An ominous feeling crept over me as I slowly slid open my cabin door once again and saw faint wisps of mist drifting down the corridor. The specters were back, their muted footsteps and hushed voices reverberating against the paneled walls of the passage. Steeling myself, I knew I must find out what they wanted if I was ever to escape this nightmare. I followed the lingering spirits to the once grand dining hall, now abandoned and echoing. In the shadows lurked dozens of pale apparitions, some hovering over tables set with moldy dishes, others drifting aimlessly through the room trailing gossamer gowns or starched collars behind them. A heavy-set man in a waistcoat stood at the head of the hall as if awaiting my arrival. As I hesitantly approached, he spoke in a distant, reedy voice. "Welcome. I am Captain Jeremiah Riggs. We have long awaited this day." I remained silent, frozen in uncertainty and fear as the apparition continued his ominous tale. He recounted the tragedy that had befallen this train over a century ago, a massive avalanche triggered by the snowstorm of the decade that swept the cars from the remote mountain pass they were traversing. All souls on board perished that fateful night, entombed forever in the icy wreckage, never to complete their Christmas journeys home. Except now, a terrible magic stirred them from their rest. The ghosts of the ill-fated train uneasily explained that they were trapped, bound to eternally relive that night unless they could find someone from the world of the living to believe their story and help release them from their endless purgatory. As they spoke, their forms seemed to shimmer and distort, as if the effort was causing them pain or difficulty. They lamented the infinite silence and cold, the nightmare of being suspended between worlds with no hope of escape. I shuddered, unsure what to do or believe. Captain Riggs pleaded with me. He explained that I was their one chance, the first living soul who could see and hear them that had crossed their path in over a century of haunting this remote site. If I would listen, acknowledge their tales, and spread word of their forgotten fate once I escaped, it might finally set their tortured spirits free. The ghostly crowd watched me with a desperate, hopeful energy, their eyes reflecting an aching longing for reprieve. I was deeply uncertain, terrified of the unearthly scene unfolding around me. But the captain's solemn dignity and the other spirits' whispered stories moved me. I realized ignoring them would condemn them to untold years more, trapped reliving this eternal limbo. Unsure if I could even help, I nevertheless agreed to bear witness to their accounts. One by one, the ghosts recounted their final memories. Excited children staring out frosty windows, a holiday feast interrupted sudden screaming terror as the avalanche tore down the mountain. The apparitions began flickering more rapidly as the spiritual effort of manifesting taxed them. Some dropped their heads into translucent hands, others clutched their throats as if being choked. Captain Riggs' voice grew fainter as he implored me to fulfill my promise. Carry their message to any who will listen, prove they existed, release them. As their strength failed, the ghostly crowd began dematerializing, their parting whispers hanging poignantly in the air. I sat alone as dawn light slowly permeated the still train. Had it all been an elaborate dream? But the decaying opulence around me proved I was still trapped in the same abandoned cars, somewhere lost in the sprawling wilderness. Suddenly, the train jolted violently to life, the engine roaring back into motion as we began rumbling down the tracks once more. I stared out the frost-limbed windows in shock as the snowy pines streamed past, picking up speed. We arrived at the nearest station shortly after, the train pulling to a noisy stop amidst whistles and billowing steam. The conductor greeted me cheerfully, as if nothing was amiss. I stumbled to a phone and managed to explain some of what occurred. A search party soon arrived to confirm my account, finding the abandoned, snow-buried wreckage miles from the tracks. My encounter had been real. In the months since, I have grappled with the profound experience of that night. The train company called it a freak occurrence, a shared hallucination brought on by altitude and isolation. But I know what I witnessed. And I have kept my promise, chronicling the fate of those lost souls online and to any who will hear me. I alone can offer them remembrance and release their voices to finally echo across the years. Their memory haunts me, and I will continue to share their spectral tale in the hopes it grants them peace. For I now know. The ghosts of the past whisper eternally, seeking release, if only we will hear.